The first thing you have to accept about the man who walked into the Foro Italico that afternoon is that he does not do things by accident. Elon Musk does not drift through European summers like a regular tourist, does not wake up in a hotel suite and think, a tennis match might be a pleasant way to spend a few hours before dinner. That is not how his mind works. His calendar is a weapon. Every airport he lands at, every room he enters, every front row seat he lowers himself into, it is all signal, all intention, all meaning. He built electric cars when the entire auto industry said it was a fantasy. He started launching rockets when the aerospace establishment told him he had no idea what he was doing. He bought one of the largest social media platforms on Earth on what looked like a whim, because he operates on a different assumption than the rest of the world, that the conventional assessment of what is possible is almost always wrong. So when he showed up at the Italian Open without the usual theater, no announcement, no fanfare, no carefully staged photograph, the confusion rippled through the stadium like a small earthquake, because Elon Musk does not simply show up, he arrives. There is a difference. And yet there he was. The Roman afternoon was warm, the kind of warmth that makes the clay smell like dust and history, and he walked through the doors of the Foro Italico like he had every right to be there, which of course he did. No fanfare, no stopping for the cameras that immediately swung in his direction like panicked flowers turning toward light. He just walked straight to the front row, took his seat, and fixed his eyes on the court. The first question everyone around him had was the same, whispered from one person to the next in a dozen different languages. Why is he here? What could possibly justify the presence of the world's richest man at a third-round clay court match on a warm Tuesday afternoon? The answer, once it became clear over the next hour and 32 minutes, was not about him at all. It was about her. About the kind of gravity that a 20-year-old from Manila had quietly learned to generate without even trying. About the strange law that Alex Eala had begun to prove, that some people don't chase attention, they simply make it inevitable. To understand what Musk saw, you have to understand what Rome already was before he sat down. The Foro Italico had been transformed across the previous days into something that no longer resembled a neutral tennis venue. It had become a pocket of the Philippines transplanted into Italian soil. The flags were everywhere, not the occasional banner of a traveling fan, but waves of color synchronized sections of seating that moved like a single living organism. Red, blue, yellow, white. And the sound, a constant, rhythmic chant that had learned to live inside the stadium's architecture. Laban Alex. If you do not speak Filipino, it roughly translates to fight, but that does not quite capture it. It means keep fighting, keep going, we are here with you all at once. It echoed around the stands like it had always been meant to live in that space. She had already earned that devotion the hard way. In the first round, she had beaten Magdalena Frech in a 3-set battle that required a comeback from a deficit in the final set, saving 9 of 10 break points in the process. That is not a statistic that happens by accident. That is a player who tightens when the moment tightens, who gets sharper when the situation demands it, who finds something extra precisely when extra is what the situation requires. Then she beat Wang Xinyu in straight sets, avenging a loss from earlier in the season, and her ranking ticked up from 42 to 38. The prize money was climbing. The trajectory was clear to anyone paying attention. But what was also climbing, what no ranking number could actually quantify, was the presence she had built inside that stadium. The way the crowd had stopped watching a tennis match and started participating in something closer to a pilgrimage. Then the draw announced her next opponent, Elena Rybakina, the reigning Australian Open champion, the woman leading the WTA Tour with 29 wins, a player whose serve is less a shot than a legal form of violence, all disguise, all weight, all speed, a projectile that arrives before your nervous system has finished processing its departure. In the match that would follow, Rybakina would hit 6 aces and commit 0 double faults. 0. That means the one vulnerable moment in every service game, the second serve, the pause where the returner can attack, simply did not exist for her that day. She was as close to airtight as you can get. The analysts had already written the headline before the first ball was struck. Learning experience, good preparation for the French Open, a chance to see where the gap really is. The story was already written. Nobody told Alex about the story. The match began, and the first thing that happened was a fracture in the script. Alex broke Rybakina's serve. Not after a long deuce battle, not off a double fault, she earned it. She stepped into the court, took the ball early, and redirected Rybakina's own pace back at her like a return gift. The flags exploded. The chanting doubled in volume, and in the front row, Elon Musk, who had been still as a statue, leaned forward. The tournament officials sitting beside him had seen this before. Not Musk specifically, but the reaction. Francesco Totti had done this. Valentino Rossi had done this. Other figures, celebrities, dignitaries, people accustomed to being the most interesting person in any room, had walked into Alex's orbit expecting to be mildly entertained and had instead been caught off guard by what they found. There is a specific moment that happens when you watch her for the first time. You arrive as a curious onlooker, and then one rally, one single refusal to do what the situation seems to require, turns you into something else. You stop spectating. You start leaning. Musk was already leaning by the second game. The first set played out at a level that made a mockery of the word mismatch asterisk. Alex hit 13 winners. That was her highest total in any single set all season. 13 winners does not come from survival, it comes from aggression. It comes from stepping inside the baseline, from taking the ball on the rise, from looking at the world number 2 and deciding that her pace belongs to you now. She was taking the ball early, redirecting with timing that made Rybakina have to reset and rethink everything. Rybakina was better in that set, 17 winners of her own, the weight of experience tilting the balance, but the gap was nothing like what had been predicted. The set went deep. It required Rybakina to actually work for it, and in the stands the richest man on earth was reportedly not watching the world number 2. He was watching the 20-year-old who refused to be afraid of her. "She's not afraid of her," he said quietly to the person beside him. It was not a question. The official nodded. "No, she never is." The second set brought the test. It always does. Rybakina came out and broke early, going up 3-1, and the stadium, which had been so loud it was almost disorienting, went into that particular kind of tense quiet that happens when a crowd senses the match might be slipping. The flags came down a fraction. The chanting softened. There's always this moment in a match like this where you hold your breath and wait to see which version of the player shows up. The one who feels the ground shifting and adjusts her feet, or the one who starts playing not to lose. With some players, you already know the answer before it happens because you have seen them in those moments before and you have watched them shrink. Alex does not shrink. She never has. She broke back immediately. No pause for composure, no tactical adjustment, no visible moment of regrouping. She just broke back, leveled it at 2-3, then held her serve to go up 3-2. The crowd came back like a wave returning to shore. The flags went up. The chanting returned louder than before, and in the front row Elon Musk was on his feet, not the polite ceremonial standing of a guest of honor acknowledging a good rally, actually on his feet. His hands came together in applause that had no performance in it. Someone near him heard him say a single word: incredible, absolutely incredible. Now here is the thing about Elon Musk that you need to hold in mind when you think about why that moment landed the way it did. This is a person whose entire life has been organized around a single, stubborn idea, that the conventional assessment of what is possible is almost always wrong. When he started Tesla, the auto industry had been making essentially the same kind of car for 100 years, and had very convincing arguments for why electric vehicles would never be practical at scale. When he started SpaceX, the established players in aerospace thought the idea of a private company building and launching rockets was either naive or dangerous or both. When he bought Twitter and renamed it X, and started doing things that made everyone in media and tech gasp and declare it a catastrophe, he was operating from a belief that the obvious path is usually not the most interesting one. He has built his entire identity around being the person in the room who looks at an impossible problem and says, "But what if we just tried it anyway?" When he watched Alex take a 3-1 deficit in the second set against the world number 2 and immediately break back and go on the offensive, he was not watching a tennis match anymore. He was watching a mirror. He was watching someone who had looked at the scoreboard, at the ranking differential, at every reasonable argument for why she should start playing it safe and cutting her losses, and had chosen instead to do the harder thing, to keep going for her shots, to keep believing in a favorable outcome when nothing around her suggested one was coming. That recognition, the thing Musk saw that afternoon, was not really about tennis. It was about something more fundamental than that. The specific quality of a person who refuses to update their belief in themselves based on how things look in a particular moment. The match ended. Rybakina won 6-4, 6-3, but those numbers need some translation because a straight sets loss against the world number 2 can mean 100 different things depending on what actually happened inside those sets. Here is what actually happened. Alex drew 32 unforced errors from Rybakina over the course of the match. 32. That means she was hitting balls at angles and with enough depth and pace that one of the best players in the world was pushed into mistakes she does not normally make. Alex's own error count was 17. She held her ground for an hour and 32 minutes against a player most people expected to close it out in under an hour. She broke the serve of a woman who had 0 double faults all day. None of that shows up in the score line. None of that gets communicated when you read 6-4, 6-3 and move on to the next match. But Musk had been sitting in the front row watching all of it, and he did not move when the match ended. He watched Alex walk toward the net. He watched her shake Rybakina's hand. He watched her walk toward the tunnel, the flags folding slowly, the chanting fading, the crowd beginning to remember that life exists outside this moment. Then he stood up. He said something to his security detail. And they moved with him toward the players' tunnel. What happened next became the most talked about celebrity encounter in the history of the Italian Open. Alex was doing what she usually does after a match, taking a moment near the exit, signing things for the fans who had gathered, still wearing the face she wears after hard losses, tired but not defeated, a small smile in place because she understands without having to think about it that her energy in that moment is something the people who came to watch her will carry home with them. Her racket bag was over her shoulder. The flags her supporters had been waving were folded now, tucked under arms, held carefully the way you hold something that meant a lot. "Miss Eala," Musk said, coming toward her. Alex looked up, and her expression did the thing faces do when the brain takes a second to fully process what the eyes are reporting. The richest person in the world was walking toward her in the tunnel of the Foro Italico with his hand not extended for a handshake but reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small object. It was a key fob but not a standard one. This was custom engraved, and when Alex turned it over in her hands, 3 words were pressed into the metal on the back: "To Mars and back." "I watched you out there," Musk told her. His voice was quieter than you would expect from a man who commands stages and launches and boardrooms. "You reminded me of something I figured out a long time ago. The impossible is really just a problem that hasn't been solved yet. You don't quit, you don't back down, you find a way forward when there isn't one." Alex's hands were not steady. She looked at the key fob and then back at him and said, "This is too much." He shook his head. "You earned it. Every point, every rally, every time the situation said stop and you kept going." He paused for a moment, and then he added something that would follow her for the rest of her career. "And whenever you want to come see what we're doing at SpaceX, that invitation is open. I think you'd feel at home there. We're working on impossible things every day." The footage of that exchange started moving across social media platforms before Alex had even left the building. Within hours, the view count was in the tens of millions. The comment section became an extraordinary collision of worlds: tennis fans and tech people and space enthusiasts and Filipinos living in every corner of the globe, all converging on the same clip, all processing the same collision of 2 universes that had no obvious reason to intersect and had done so anyway in the most memorable possible way. The takes ranged widely. Some people focused on the symbolism of the engraved message, pointing out that "to Mars and back" is not a casual phrase for Musk. It is the actual mission, the literal destination his company is pointed toward, and handing it to Alex was a way of saying her journey maps onto something he understands at a deep level. Other people noted that Musk has never been especially known for spontaneous generosity with his personal time, that the image of him walking through a player's tunnel to hand something to a 20-year-old tennis player was genuinely unusual behavior, and that unusual behavior from Elon Musk tends to mean he has seen something that moved him in a way he cannot ignore. Philippine media ran with it the way you would expect, because the story of Alex is already one of the great ongoing narratives in that country. A young woman from Manila who left home at 13 to chase something almost no one from her background had chased before. Every new chapter, every celebrity who shows up and says, "I see you, I see what you're doing," gets woven into the larger fabric of what she represents. From Rome to Mars, one headline read. And honestly, as headlines go, that one earns it. The press conference that followed was not the press conference anyone had prepared questions for. The journalists who filed into the room had their tennis questions ready. The ones about Rybakina's serve, about the clay surface, about what the Italian Open run meant for Alex's confidence heading into the French Open. Those questions mostly didn't get asked, because Alex walked in with the key fob still in her hand, still turning it over occasionally, and the room shifted its focus immediately. "What did he say to you?" a reporter asked. Alex looked down at the object in her hand for a moment. "He said the impossible is just a problem waiting to be solved. He said I reminded him of the people at SpaceX, the ones who don't know how to quit." She paused, and her eyes had something in them that doesn't normally make it into press conferences. "He said something that I keep thinking about. He said, 'You're going to Mars not because it's easy but because it's hard.' And that I've been proving my whole life that hard is exactly the kind of thing you go toward." The room went quiet in the way rooms do when something genuine has just been said, when no one wants to interrupt it with the sound of a question. "I don't know if I'll actually go to space," Alex continued, and a small smile came with it. "But I understood what he meant. The trip from Manila to Majorca when I was 13 to train. The climb from outside the top 100 to number 38. The road from losing every clay court match I played to pushing the world number 2 to a real contest at the Foro Italico. That's the same shape as the journey. That's the impossible thing broken down into individual problems solved one at a time. That's my Mars, and I'm not done yet." The room started clapping, not the polite, scattered applause of a press conference that has reached its formal conclusion. Real applause from journalists, from officials, from people who had probably been to hundreds of these things and rarely felt this way at the end of one. Alex stood, nodded once to the room, and walked out. The key fob was still in her hand. Here is what you keep thinking about when you sit with this whole story. 3 different people in 3 different weeks leading up to and including Rome looked at Alex compete in a match she did not win and came away changed by it. Novak Djokovic, who has won more Grand Slams than anyone in history, gave her his personal journal from 2007, the year he was still building toward the greatness that would eventually redefine the sport, and wrote inside it that she reminded him of himself. Roger Federer, who turned tennis into something that looked like art, gave her a platinum bracelet engraved for the fighter who never quits. Elon Musk, who has spent his career treating impossibility as an invitation, watched her refuse to back down against the world number 2 and handed her a piece of metal that says asterisk to Mars and back. None of these people showed up on days when Alex won everything. They showed up on days when she competed with everything, days when the score line said loss, but the performance said something much harder to categorize. And each of them saw the same essential thing in a slightly different way because they were each drawing on their own experience of what it looks like when someone has what it genuinely takes. The gift was not the key fob. The key fob is an object. The gift was what the engraving communicated. That someone who has spent his entire adult life chasing things most people consider unreachable looked at a 20-year-old from the Philippines fighting from a position of disadvantage and said, "The spirit I see in you is the same spirit that makes my rockets land." That is not a small thing to be told. Alex's Italian Open campaign ended at the third round. The ranking moved to 38. The prize money reached a number that would have seemed impossible when she first left home at 13. The French Open is next, the clay court Grand Slam, the tournament where the best players on earth converge on Paris, where the surface punishes every weakness and rewards every strength, and where a 20-year-old with a key fob in her bag and the endorsements of Djokovic and Federer and now Musk will walk onto the court and be exactly who she's been all along. Someone who looks at the impossible and gets closer to it every single time, to Mars and back. She said it at the end of the press conference with the key fob held up for the cameras. Not because it's easy, because it's hard. And then she walked out and the French Open was waiting and the flags would be there and the chanting would be there and somewhere in the universe of people now paying very close attention to what Alex does next, Elon Musk would be watching too.